All right. Thank you so much, Jen. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon from London. I'm Dan Belmont, and we are back for our final third session of our uncorking collaboration across retailers and producers here in New York State. This is, again, our part three of the Roundtable series. And we look to kind of bring together what we learned in our first two sessions, culminating with insights from the entire series, and outline some actionable steps for driving success of New York wines in retail settings. And so we'll once again look at those key takeaways from our previous two discussions, which focused on consumer marketing and logistics and resources. And we'll go through some of the challenges and successes and propose solutions. If you do have any questions throughout, please do not hesitate to put them into the Q&A box or our chat, and we'll make every effort to tackle them in real time. If it's something we think we'll table to the end, we will certainly have time for Q&A. And so I am joined once more by some wonderful panelists, which I'd love to introduce to you now. We're starting with Yancey Stanforth Migliore, the co-founder of White Cliff Vineyards. Yancey, how are you?
Pretty good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and just reintroduce yourself for our last session here.
Okay. So as Dan said, I'm a co-owner of White Cliff Vineyard with my husband. Very much a family business. 25 years in, we're in the Mid-Hudson Valley, which means we're less than 2 hours north of New York City, up the Hudson River. And we make something like 6,000 cases annually, depending on the year. And we have fairly recently added a second tasting room. We have about 35 acres of vineyard, which makes us one of the bigger ones in our region. And we're still excited about promoting New York after all these years.
Thank you very much for joining us. Our other winery representative, we have Chad Hendrickson, the brand ambassador from Lakewood Vineyards. How are you, Chad?
I'm doing well. Good morning. I'm Chad Hendrickson. I've been with Lakewood since 2004. Like Yancey, Lakewood is a family-owned and largely operated winery. We're in the Finger Lakes. We make roughly 100,000 gallons a year. We have, again, roughly about 100 acres under production. So we're a moderate-sized winery for sure, but still, I would say, a pretty small winery in the global world. So happy to be on. Thank you.
Thanks. Over to our retailer representatives. We have Matt Yeager, owner of Pinnacle Wine and Liquor in Rochester. How are you, Matt?
Doing great, Dan. Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. I'm Matt Yeager. My family owns and operates Pinnacle Wine and Liquor. We're in Rochester, New York. We're a medium-sized store that has originally been around since 1997. We've been in our current location since 2012. And we love curating wine from all over the world, and especially selling and promoting the Finger Lakes as well. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. We next have Michael Carrera, the owner of Michaeltown Wine and Spirits in Brooklyn Heights. Mike, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me again. Great opportunity to spend time with all of you. And I've been in business I'm a third generation wine and liquor store owner. My store has actually been in existence since 1934. So we've seen quite a bit of change generationally in this industry. And it's very exciting to talk about always how we all can move forward. Great opportunity.
Thank you, sir. And we have a special guest on, a man who needs no introduction. We have Sam Filler, the executive director of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. How are you, Sam?
Doing great. Good to see you, Dan. Glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, and on that note, thank you all for having the flexibility to come back and join us on a fresh date. I was in no shape for this last week, but yeah, human once more. One of the challenges that we've kind of talked about, particularly in our first session, diving right into it, there's a shifting. We have to work to shift the consumer perception to align with the high quality and competitive pricing of New York wines. And so we're looking at the value propositions of New York State wine, its strengths, right? And then just the improved wine quality. You know, there's never been a better time to drink New York State wine. And so I'd love to go around it with the group and just kind of, you know, share maybe an example of a tactic that is working for you in terms of engagement, in terms of storytelling, that is really bringing people into the fold for New York State wine. Anybody want to jump in first? Otherwise, I'm going to pick on somebody.
I could start if you want.
Yeah, let's go for it. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so I think so I've been buying wine for my business for over 30 years. I have been in the business my whole life. I feel I read a tremendous amount about our business. I like stats, all that things. I look at Nielsen things at times. We're not a state that's very good at that because we're independent, so we don't have that kind of, which I think is refreshing as well. But what I think is fascinating on a couple of levels here is the quality picture of New York State wines is just better than ever. Obviously, I've been tasting these wines for years, as other regions in the world. Wine, there's a lot of really good wine out there, and there's a lot of good wine being made in New York State. Um, I think when I love so I went we rehashed just to rehash from the last couple of conversations. I didn't wasn't able to attend that Cap Franc event last month. I was traveling, but I love the fact that there is a key in on a varietal that seems to really work in the state. Now, Cap Franc is frankly a difficult sell because of a lot of people don't even understand what Cap Franc is, but I actually think that's an opportunity for us, for retail like me, who this is what you specialize in, this is what the state really could grow well. And so maybe Pinot Noir is not what New York should be focused on. And I'm just being broad strokes here, general. And I think that's great that we're it seems as a group we're trying to go in that direction. And I think, like for instance, just to take a success of another wine region, Oregon. I mean, 50 years ago, Pinot Noir wasn't really as relevant in the United States. It was always more of a finicky grape from Europe, particularly France. And the fact that like a state like Oregon is it's synonymous when you think of wine with Pinot Noir, I think is a they've built that quality, good grapes. People like the style, and it seems to work well there. So I love when we see things like in our state doing something like that. I think that makes this as a retailer an opportunity. So I've actually that's just been brainstorming in my head a bit. We're all trying to figure out I mean, we all have to be, let's face it, this industry we are in a challenging time right now. We're trying to figure out what wines sell, what customers like. Um, I also think dry Riesling and semi-dry Riesling is an opportunity too. Obviously, the state does a great job with it. Downstate, it's challenging. Riesling isn't as popular, and until people don't understand it, they think of it as sweet, cloying, old school. Peter Sitchell just died from Blue Nun, and I was thinking about. That wine and what people entry level Blue Nun, sweet leaf from milk. But Riesling is, I think, perfect for people who nowadays seem to want to drink lighter, less alcohol, all those things. So I think that if we could figure out how to, and a lot of it's word of mouth, it's conversations in my store, talking to my sales reps about these wines, asking them to bring me samples, just communicating. So I think that's exceptionally important. I think it starts there, just relearning it, because maybe 25 years ago when I tasted something and I have something in my head and the years go by and I know it sounds odd, but sometimes you'll try something and a decade later it's really on, and in my head I'm like thinking about it with old view. And I love the fact of refreshing and like I said, the quality is definitely there. I think the consumer is willing to pay a fair price point. I think we all know the $20 to $30 retail range is probably the best opportunity for everybody. Um, so I think there's a great future here. So I'd love to hear what you all think about my comments.
Michael, what prior to this exciting push for Cabernet Franc, which I think is very valid, warranted, and I think we could argue the last kind of maybe decade, the Riesling star has continued to rise. What downstate, right? What is the general knowledge base of New York State wine? Do the average consumer know that we even make wine? Is that
Um, I
where are we over the last few years where yes, I think a variety is a great entry point, but do people just need to know that we make really good wine?
I
Full stop.
agree. I think this is a hyper. So there's 8.5 million people live in New York City. This is the metro. New York is Westchester, Long Island, Northern New Jersey, all that stuff, right? This is a huge market. It's also exceptionally saturated, as we all know. I think there's 700 wine importers and wholesalers in New York State. There's an immense amount of national small wine distributors, importers that have set up shop first in New York. There's a tremendous amount of marketing. I was actually speaking with a marketing gentleman the other day who does a lot of events. We just had the Trey Beccari. We just had they're doing the slow food. Is a lot of European influence in marketing. So what I'm trying to say is the time that my brain and my body can handle for listening and consuming information is, you know, not infinite. So like we are constantly being bombarded with events, trade shows, um, learning, and I think that there is it's obviously hyper competitive, and I think that the consumer and really the buyer doesn't really have they're being hit with a lot more information before you guys get to it, and I think that's part of why we're having this conversation, and I think the, the going to market it's blocking and tackling. It's in football speak. It's little wins here because we are an independent liquor store market, which is a great market. I think because you get to see gatekeepers instead of going to one bar. It's a whole other conversation. Or even restaurants here in New York are very much not chain centric. It's not like you're saying I mandated, at every Marriott. That's not really what New York's all about. Let's face it, on an on-premise level as well. So, but I think that learning about these products and learning that the quality level is there, and it's there, but I think it's one winery's conversation at a time with these individual stores, and it's challenging, but I think it's happening, and I see. So just to take another success story, which I think success, like so, let's say the Brooklyn distilleries, they ooze into my store. They walk in, they're constantly knocking on my door, and they're showing me product. And when they first came out with the product, I was like, some of these are good, some of these are well, some of them that are good are really customers reacting to them, and I do a pretty good job, but it's the guys are doing tastings once a month. They're spending time with my staff. It's like they are part of the store, and that's easier because they're in walking distance from my store naturally. I just tasted a bunch of sakis, Brooklyn sake, which is in a industry city. I have like 20 of his sakis. So if you come into my sakis, and I have a very large sake section now, and if you see you'll see Brooklyn Cura. So it can be done. We all know the products can be made. You all know how well you can make your wines, and I think that just getting those conversations and teaching people about it, and like I said, there is a quality level that I think is here. Like I've tasted it just in having these conversations with all of you. I've asked some of my reps bring me samples, And we're like, the wines are really nice. They're really good quality value ratio. There's no reason why they can't sell them. We can't sell
I
them.
think
So,
for me is once is the juice hits the lips, the work is largely done. The wines, the majority of the wines, sure, speak for themselves. Coming from London, my experience in London over the last decade, I see a lot of similarities between London and the UK wine industry as compared to New York City and the New York wine industry. I'm not sure that people come to London to drink UK wine. I think they come to London to drink the world's great wines, right? And I think with the kind of wide scope and access that New York City has to the world's great wines, I think that's what you first think of. And so, what I'm seeing here in the UK is a lot of pride, honestly, right? And you have people that they are Londoners, or they are English, British, and you have similarly, like, New Yorkers are some of the proudest people I know, and it's surprising to me sometimes that there's not more New York pride around our products, right? And I think we've seen over the last, 20 years, the farm to table local movement, in terms of food, and yet we don't really see that as much with our wine. Wine isn't keeping up with the trend. So I wanted to talk to Yancey. Yancey, you're just north of New York City, and I get it. Bandwidth is an issue to go knocking on doors, and the commute even from the east end of Long Island out to Brooklyn's a real pain. And so, I hear you. I understand that is a big part of the equation. But what can we do on a winery level to build just local pride?
Well, one thing that I grew up in Manhattan, and but I've spent 40 years now living in the Hudson Valley, and I go back and forth all the time. And I've thought a lot about the puzzle of New York City's resistance to taking pride in New York wine. And my conclusion is that it is the fact that New York City folk tend to be very proud citizens, not of New York State, but of the world. It's a very cosmopolitan place. And wine, I think perhaps distillates have taken off more readily, getting a place on the shelf, because there's a history of, say, bourbon as really an American product. It's more of a leap maybe for people with wine, since historically I think people think of it originally as European. So I think that's a lot of what we're up against. But at the same time, people love getting in on the ground floor of something new, and the quality has become wonderful. So we have a lot of opportunity to catch people's eye with something like Cab Franc, which is in many people's eyes something new. And it's a fun story to tell. I'm constantly explaining to people, oh, it's, you've heard of Cabernet Sauvignon, but Cabernet Franc came first. It's the parent grape. And, it's got a lot of the same flavors, but it's a little bit lighter bodied by nature. So it's more food friendly. There's a nice story to tell and that people connect with. And so I think the fact that our quality has come up so much, the fact that there are groups like Cab Franc Forward that are really gathering producers together to get down to the city, and picking up where the New York Wine and Grape Foundation had left off before the pandemic, getting to that market en masse, has a lot of potential to help us, and is making gradual progress. For me, I'm a self-distributor, which means that I'm a winery owner. I wear a lot of hats, and I am really our face for wholesale. But so it's an extra challenge for me to get out there all the time, and but it is one I enjoy. So I will keep at it. But it's one of the things that come through loud and clear to me through the course of these discussions is, just re-emphasizing what I knew, that it's all about relationships. And we've emphasized a lot that it's about communication. which is, the challenge for me, since I'm not just a distributor, I do so many other things. So that's a very good, important reminder, the need to get out there and speak to each other and bring this story to people.
Yeah. This time of year, over the last kind of 2 months, I've been working very hard to, introduce my new imports in the UK, including some wines from New York, to new accounts. My wholesale arm has been live for about a year, and we still have to do a lot of pushing in order to just open the accounts. That's the hard part, because again, the wines kind of speak for themselves. And so, if you're in a crowded market and the wines are very good, but there's a lot of good wine around, what I've largely been doing is, I'm saying, like, we're small but mighty, right? And you have this opportunity to have a relationship with me, and I'm at the point where a new account is, of a certain level of value, where, yeah, you want to do an event, let's do an event. You want to do a social media campaign, let's do a social media campaign. I'm your guy. Right. And that's also nice to have a guy, right? I got a guy. That's great. It's a good thing. And so, I'm finding that, exclusivity is also playing into it. Again, the fact that we are fresh on the scene, our products have an opportunity to turn people's heads, and you could say you've been there first. Right. And that seems to be working out well. I want to come to Matt, but Michael's got his hand up, so we'll give him a chance to chime in, and then Matt, I got a question for you, my friend.
So we're talking chopping it up here. We're talking shop. So two things that come to mind about New York State wine, and maybe this is something that could be an opportunity in the marketing of a grassroots marketing somehow on a state level. Or so we're all wine people on this call. So I think it's great that we are talking about this, but we don't really, we think we understand the customer, but let's be honest here, the reason why we're here is because we're trying to figure out what the customer really wants and activate them, right? So when I think of, if I'm a consumer, Cab Franc, it doesn't even say anything about New York and Enable. It talks about another country. Riesling, when I think of Riesling, I definitely think of Germany, maybe Alsace. So to me, those are the two iconic grapes in New York State, right? So maybe in some sort of corny, goofy marketing, we could figure out how to equate that, because I think that's what we have to simplify this, and I think collectively, and this is obviously from let's say this organization that's wonderfully sponsoring this conversation. I think they get it, and the message, all of you get it, that if we could unify somehow a message to make this more fun and simple, and explain that because I think that may help activate the masses. And like I was in upper Midtown the other day. I had dinner Monday night. I always walk into liquor stores. I say hello to people. I know store owners, and I walked in a store, and they had a number of wine. I was talking to the person there, and they had a couple of Rieslings from New York. Of probably the 7 Rieslings they had, 2 of them were from New York. Cab Franc, they had some Chenons, but they were on the shelf, and I'm sure they do well. I just think the conversation, how do you because you want to be able to get share, not just of the Riesling world, and you don't want to just get share of the Cab Franc world. You want to be able to create your own share, and that's what we all would like to have, nothing more. So it means, frankly, at this point, probably not getting any new customers, because I don't know how many new customers are coming to our world. It means taking share from, let's say, other French wines, Beaujolais, and so just having these conversations, thinking about teaching people about how these particular grapes, let's say if it's these two, I think that's part of the conversation. How to use it, so that would be my suggestion.
So I've got a tactic that I've been working with, but I'm gonna put it in my back pocket for a minute. We're gonna get through the rest of our panelists here, and then if it's still relevant, I'm gonna bust it out here. But Matt, I wanted to come to you. A lot of the things we're talking about here, looking back at the kind of broader value proposition of New York State wine, right? We've got smaller, independent owned producers, right? You've got this ground floor grassroots vibe. We've got wines that are, generally speaking, lower alcohol, right? We've got higher acidities, which makes us food friendly in things. What of these things are actually resonating with people, whether it's with New York State wine or not, right? Is lower alcohol part of the conversation right now? Is food pairing the quickest way to get to somebody, right? Or do we need to look to a larger lifestyle approach, right? Where we're not getting so, nitty gritty into grape varieties and things like that. Because I do agree with Michael, the wine bubble's real, right? Especially when you take social media into it, right? That there's a lot of talking to ourselves. So sorry, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I find more and more that food pairing doesn't really matter that much. Younger consumers who I would say we should all be focusing on, because I've found the most success in embracement of New York wine with, let's say, 21 to 40-year-olds, where maybe the old inherent biases aren't there that they might have, the older generations might have had. And they really just they want to know the story. They want to know the people, which is great because I think by and large, we can all tell you exactly who is behind all these projects, which is great. So I think they value transparency, and I think that the low alcohol thing really does matter. I think that is the strength that we have to really lean into, which is these wines are refreshing, they're sessionable, if you will. They're chillable, meaning even the red wine often is more enjoyable with the chill, which is I find more and more, we'll have let's say younger clients come in, they say, hey, what's your favorite chillable red right now? And I can steer them to a Blaufränkisch from the Finger Lakes, or even some Cabernet Francs. So I think that's really what we need to lean into. And just going back, you mentioned something about collaboration and exclusivity. I mean, one case study that I can put out here that I think wineries and retailers should really think about is, you're within oftentimes a drive, whether it's an hour and a half drive from many of these wineries. Lean into trying to collaborate with them, and lean into, we're actually working with a restaurant friend of ours to make an exclusive white wine for the spring. And we're going to share it, between the restaurant and our shop. And we're going to be proud of that because we're helping to make the calls on, what we want to see in that wine and how we want it to taste. And that brings a level of pride and ownership that I think really makes a difference. And your customers, they see that, and they see that you believe in New York wine. And then they say, well, Matt or, Michael, they're the experts here. They really believe in this. I should believe in it. What am I missing? And then they start to visit wineries on their own, and then they start to really get invested. And then I think it just starts to unlock from there. So that would be my advice is, focus on those relationships, communicate with your customers about how much you believe in these wines. And again, I'm a big believer in communication of all forms. So, you mentioned you were opening new accounts. I'm sure once you open those new accounts, Dan, you're staying in contact via email with them every maybe 3 or 4 weeks, if not more frequently. So whether it's email, text, I mean, stay in touch with your winery, stay in touch with your customers, and they'll start to notice that, oh man, these guys really believe in this product, and they'll understand how good it is.
Yeah, for me, the first year was largely selling to my network, my friends, right? And now I'm trying to stretch beyond that network, and that's a different ball game, no doubt about it. And so, yeah, thank you for that. Hey, Chad, I want to talk to you. What kind of work are you and Lakewood doing to communicate, the value propositions of your products, and what's working, what's not?
It's a big question. I was thinking about as we were talking initially, about New York City markets, and then there's certainly a separation, at least in my mind, between your New York City markets and your upstate markets, right? I mean, the last data that I could find, there's what, over 50,000 liquor licenses in New York State, 30,000, over 30,000 are in New York City. You know, I mean, if I can catch 1% of that, I'm selling more wine than we make annually. So New York City is so large and vast that there's a piece of the pie for everyone listening in on this call and everyone on the call. Walking in with the products, or at least what I do when I walk in with the products that people associate with New York State Rieslings, sparkling wines, and really now Cab Franc. But I'll bring the other wines that we make as well, especially on premise. I seem to be successful with products like Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. Our sparkling wines do really well. We have a sweet wine Vignoble that does really well in on premise that traditionally serves spicier cuisine because they go well together. So I'm bringing this up because I would suggest that we don't limit ourselves, although we should be proud of the key wines that we make. We should not limit ourselves to those, you know, Rieslings and Cab Francs. That's a little different than upstate, though, right? Like in upstate, I find it really is market specific. And I've mentioned this before on the call, where what's successful for me in Syracuse is absolutely not successful for me in Albany or Rochester or Buffalo. And I find those markets are somewhat more traditional. They're expecting wines from us that are a little sweeter sometimes, that are more value propositioned, right? They're not really jumping in, and I'm being very broad stroked here, right? But they're not jumping into the $30+ bottles. They're really sticking with those wines that are in the $15 to $25 range. So again, I guess I want to reiterate before I get into answering your question. Got to know your market, right? And what is successful for me, I think, may not be so successful for other people. So really accurate notes. Don't be afraid of no's, because that's really by and large what you're going to hear, especially these days.
Numbers game.
You know, right. You just got to work with the markets you have, but understand those markets. They're all different. I think what's working for Lakewood right now are those relationships. You know, it's a big state again, 50,000 plus liquor licenses, if that's accurate. I mean, that's from 2019. That's the closest data I could find. But you know, to call on, again, maybe 1% of those accounts annually is very, very difficult to do, but you got to try, right? You got to get out there and make sure that they know who you are and the product that you're making. And I feel like our product specifically is very consistent from year to year, both in quality and price point, and that's a good selling point. And I would say that's true of the Finger Lakes as a whole, and really New York State as a whole. Our wines are very consistent from year to year as far as quality goes. Obviously, profiles are going to change. We all know that because of vintages, but quality is always there, and that is a huge selling point for us. So, I don't want to go on, but that's kind of where I say it.
Oh,
So.
awesome. And it's going to be a nice segue, because we're going to kind of talk about, you know, amplifying the message. And I have some thoughts there. You know, yesterday I got pitched on a CRM software platform specifically designed for wine distributors. And so it's actually popular in the States. They're kind of bringing it over to the UK. And, you know, he kept on saying, oh, you know, and for your sales team and for your sales reps and for your sales team. And I'm like, every time I just kind of died a little bit on the inside because I'm like, no, me, right? And so, you know, as a small team, right, band of one, you really do need to find ways to amplify, right, and do that, you know, and have those relationships. Put some effort into these relationships that can then kind of live on and take on a life of its own. And again, we'll get into a bit of that. Sam, just wanted to check in with you. You know, Sam and I met gosh, it was probably 2018 on a visit for you to London, and I was just attending a New York State kind of master class that you were hosting, and we got to chatting. And I think over the years, my opinions with marketing New York State wine in other markets in New York State, and the New York Wine and Grape Foundations has evolved in a lot of ways. And you guys specifically have to play with everybody, right? Which is a good thing, right? And so, your messages can be broader by default, And so for me, my addition here, and I want you to just kind of take on it is I'd add that if you can, there's the line, right? If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, right? Gosh, we leaned into that for years and years and years and years and years. I am proposing that it is outdated. Okay. Now, for in-state locals, they probably complain about the weather more often than not. I know that I did. So how could we possibly grow good wine? Right. But it is important to remind people that very few great wines are made in paradise. Okay. Burgundy, great example. It is not an easy place to make wine between frost and hail. And, you want to talk about vintage variation because of its monoculture of only Pinot and Chardonnay. It is pigeonholing them to even more extreme vintage variation than I'd say that New York is challenged with, because New York has the broad selection of grapes and styles to work with to create great quality wine year after year. As Chad said, yes, vintage variation, but consistent quality. Our terroir, whether you are talking Hudson Valley, Finger Lakes, Long Island, etc., it is specific. Look up and down the East Coast, find me more specific terroir than what we are working with. I think that makes it special. And so I suggest, I put out there that if you can make it here, then you should. Right. And so, I think our history is varied with, the combination of our time with hybrid and native grape varieties, our with prohibition, with resetting. We're a young region with history. There's a lot of iconoclastic kind of storylines that we work with here. However, we shouldn't have to apologize for any of it. Right. I kind of want to encourage everyone to really be proud of what we have. It is, I'm not, I don't think that I'm not speaking to anyone in particular. It's just for me, we should be on the same playing field in terms of the way that we talk about our production, about our wine, about our terroir, as California, as France, as Germany, as everywhere else. And if you just kind of put everything on an even playing field, the conversations tend to go so much easier. You don't know about New York wine? Well, you should. This is amazing. How come, right? How come? So Sam, you've been, running the show now for gosh, when did you start? Remind me. Decade ago?
Not quite. 2017. So
Okay,
I'm
so
in my
great.
eighth.
So yeah, not long after, not long before we met. What excites you today? What are you seeing that gets you out of bed in the morning to continue to amplify the message of New York State wine?
Well, I have been involved with the industry now for 13 years, I think. Yeah. And I would agree with the sentiment that Michael has expressed, is just, and in Chad, that the quality of New York State wine is there. It's consistently there. I mean, when I started 13 years ago, I think it was very consistent then. And I mean, I didn't really, admittedly, was probably more of a beer drinker before I jumped into this more, but um, I think across the board everyone is doing really great. And when we did do New York Drinks New York, which was a great opportunity to taste everyone's stuff, you could see just the gradual improvement every year. So I think that's a positive. And I think I'm excited because while we don't have a lot of large producers, or barely any except for Gallo, it's a constellation of small family-owned businesses with folks who are very passionate about what they're doing, and they're artists. So that's what makes it fun, is everyone has their own unique take on how they make their Riesling, how they make their Cabernet Franc. Um, you know, Yancey at Wycliffe, they updated their labels, and they have a Syrah that you can find into the Whole Foods in New York City. That's really interesting and exciting. So um, my neighbor here, I just moved to Albany. He's like, I love Malbec, Argentinian Malbec. And I was like, well, we got Malbec here in New
Long
York. And
Island, let's go.
yeah, so I happened to be going to Long Island, and I was like, I'm going to pick you up some Malbec from Bedell. And I brought that for him. And it's not the punching your face type of Malbec from Argentina. It's a little more finessed and suave. And he loved it. And he's signed up for their wine club now. So um, I guess the long way of saying, I think the folks that are making the wines here in New York are more accessible than if you were to deal with a bigger brand. So I think, as you encourage people, or Matt encouraged, it's like, the wineries are not too far, so you can go see them in person and you can form that relationship. And that's what our marketing is really about, is, like, these are small family-owned businesses, and, you'll get to know the winemaker and the owners, and they're all wonderful people, and they're making a great product.
And I wonder how much of it is getting people out of New York City to visit. I mean, and telling, I remember I wrote a blog article for Wine and Grape Foundation during the pandemic, and it was a bit of a travelogue, like getting on the Long Island Railroad and taking the train out to the East End, and then how, a bit of the logistics that it takes in order to experience these places, taking the train up to Beacon, or going out and renting your car in New Jersey, where it's a lot cheaper. And then you're straight shot north up to the Finger Lakes from there, and then you come over the hill and the expanse opens up in front of you. And I wonder, for me, that's what did it for me. It was the seeing is believing part of it. It was getting out of the city and seeing it, and to appreciate it so much more. And so I'm going to go, thank you, Sam. So I'm going to go back
Can
to
I just add,
of course.
on that point related, Michael was talking about, like, he has no shortage of things that he can attend to discover wines from around the world. And I think that is the challenge in New York City, is it is highly competitive. It's very well saturated. And I've said this many times before, the France spends $2 million alone per year to market in New York City. The Wine and Grape Foundation's annual budget is $2.5 million. And the
The world.
circumstances of us meeting, we are much more successful in promoting our wines in international markets than it is in New York City, and that's just a function of a grant that we have that allows us to do that work. And um, I don't know about the receptivity, but your point about tourism, I don't, I think we just got to show them how, and that's a marketing cost too. But it's these things are not impossible to overcome. It's prioritizing and being smart. And I think you'll recall, we used to have a brand ambassador ourselves at the Wine and Grape Foundation, Paul Brady, and he was doing a fantastic job up until COVID. But part of what he was doing was being the boots on the ground to go meet with the retailers and the restaurants in New York City, and we were starting to see some success with that. But that's how you compete against a $2 million budget and big tasting events, is you just got to show up in the stores and do the tastings. I'm sure I said this to Yancey before. I mean, I used to live on the Upper West Side, and you can walk down Amsterdam Avenue, and literally every 5 blocks, there's a really high quality wine shop that has a nice curated selection of wines. Some of them carry New York State wines, but if someone was there knocking on their door every week doing tastings, whether that's a winery or a representative of this association, that would go a long way in educating people, getting it. Our consultants like to say, "Get the liquid on lips." So I think that's ultimately what you have to do, and the product will move.
It does seem, that again, small but mighty, right? And so at that point, storytelling is perhaps one of our strongest, means of communication, of introducing these products on a very person to person level here. And so, Michael, we had a question come through the chat just for the group. The question was how many New York State SKUs, not including sake or spirits, do you have in your store?
It obviously varies with the time of year, but I would say probably right now, I'd say I have about, not including sake and spirits, right? I would say probably 25 wines, 20 to 25 wines. Yeah.
Excellent. Very good.
Say, and
So,
I'm gonna I'm gonna say this. I probably have New York State products 100. So that's interesting. And that's most of that, like I said, is local downstate. So what Sam is just pointing out is so like I feel like, for instance, let's take Prosecco. They spent an immense amount of time and money promoting Prosecco in the States, New York. I mean, I remember 30 years ago, nobody knew what Prosecco was. I just think there's has to be a high level lift of this conversation because we've been having this conversation. I've been having this conversation about New York State wine for 30 years. Um, so I think there has to be a high level campaign, and Sam's pointing out that there's a lot of other people coming to this particular city and spending time. And some of the reason why I'm really interested is because I get to spend time with you people, and it's a great conversation, and it's a relationship. Or I feel like we're even though we're on Zoom, where this is amazing. I love it. You guys are inspiring me. But what ends up happening is in a couple of months, you're just getting bombarded with more and more information. But I think I actually had dinner the other night with a prominent CEO of one of the largest wholesalers in New York State, and we were talking about a winery. And I was telling him how this restaurant nearby actually coincidentally sells some of their wines, and we were talking about like just getting access to taste product, and he said he would introduce me to a person from the winery, and I said it was a great connection because it was doing well. It was doing well in the restaurant from as a neighborhood restaurant. I see, the restaurant's doing well. It's a few blocks away. Like I just wish that winery had the resources to go knock on every door in the neighborhood and say, look, the customers that are dining in this restaurant like this wine, and I really love that you carry it. I think you should taste it. It's successful. We're not having those conversations. We're not having that those meetings. I meet with people all the time. I just had a presentation from a rosé producer, top 10 rosé producer in the country that's from France. And they basically told me their brand's up. They showed me their Nielsen data. I like them. I know these people for years. And I haven't carried it in quite some time. And I took it back in. I bought 5 cases of it. So this is the kind of conversations we need an articulate pitch. We need a pitch is not it can't be the do me a favor pitch. And I know nobody wants that. We want this can sell. I believe in this brand. You guys are owners, so if you're spending time with the buyer, that's great. But I believe in this brand. I think it could be successful. This is why. The other day I meet more French winemakers in my store than I do. I had a Burgundy producer in my store the other day. I tasted through his lineup than I do from New York people. So these are all major reasons why I think this is immense. The opportunities there, the major reasons to connect, and these it's happening. So they want to be here, those European guys. But at the end of the day, I only have enough time. I don't have an infinite amount of customers. There's a certain aspect of our store that we can recommend consumers to segue them to wine, to purchases. Most customers come in, I don't care what store you're talking about, they have determined what they want to buy. And if you could figure out how to And part of the excitement and challenge of owning a small wine shop or a wine store in New York State is you want to be able to tell customers, hey, this is my stamp on this. I've curated this wine for you. The only way that's going to happen is through education, exposure, and it's look. I drove up to Albany last Tuesday, guys. It's not an easy drive for me. Getting out of New York City is like an octopus. It doesn't want to let you go. As much as you want to get, it's not far, but it's the brain drain of trying to get up past the GW any sort of way. And we're all smiling and laughing, but we know it's true. So it's I know for coming down here, I'm sure it's the same reality. Trying to get a parking spot, it just drains you. But I think once you get past all that, it's quite refreshing to be able to connect with somebody who's a local person who's in the same world. And like I said, I had a French Burgundy producer, this gentleman. He came in, he owns a small property. He told me his story. We talked a bit about what's going on in the world. He was joking around about politics. It was a great conversation. Will I buy his wine? Maybe. But I tell you what, I'm going to buy his wine. Chance of me buying his wine before he walked in was probably zero. He's got a shot now, and he spent the whole day with a rep, and he probably had a bunch of appointments and successful conversations. He was and the wine was in the bottle. And so I think this could all happen here. It's there. It certainly has to start with quality, which we all know I think the quality is there. And telling you the success stories. I love to hear when somebody says to me, look, in New York City, we sell 5 times the amount of this wine that we do, let's say, in upstate, because these particular restaurants are just killing it because it goes great with their food. That's a great conversation for me to have with my customer and say, hey, this, I found this restaurant, I connected, the wines love it. It authenticates everything. So it's small conversations.
Yeah, I think, so for me in particular, my business here, the stock that I have for e-commerce is you're very rarely going to find it on a what we would call the high street, main street store, right? These are wines that you're more likely to come across in a fine dining establishment or in the hot trendy restaurant, right? Because I'm buying it from the same suppliers that are bringing it to the restaurants. And we do a ton of traffic just off of Wine Searcher because people come in, they have this wine for dinner, then they look for it online, and we're one of the only ones that have it. I think there's a clear takeaway here that you cannot undervalue the human to human in-person connection, the boots on the ground storytelling, the tasting, without a doubt, right? The challenge obviously is, as we're most of us small, independent owned, operated wineries, producers, and store owners is bandwidth. Right. Not everybody has a brand ambassador. The state doesn't have a brand ambassador anymore. I don't have a sales rep. I've got, there's these challenges. So how can we amplify the message? And I'm going to open this to the rest of the group. If anybody has any kind of ideas, something they've tried, something they want to try, or something that they have tried and is working, how can we amplify the message using technology, using different mediums that we have available to us, using QR codes on shelf talkers, using your website, using content creation and all that kind of stuff. What's working and what are we not doing enough of?
Dan, I have a very specific question. I don't know if it's practical or if there would be interest in it, but
Sure.
As a self-distributor, I'm a classic case of this lack of bandwidth. I'm truly a one person trying to do too much. One of my biggest challenges has always been, for the 20 plus years I've been pitching wholesale, is to figure out, since my time is limited, where should I go? Where should I put my time? Because there are so many stores that couldn't care less about New York wine. I will be completely wasting my time to go there. And this would be a question for Matt and Michael, do you think there'd be any interest in stores that would like to taste more New York wine, consider more New York wine, putting themselves on a list, say with the New York Wine and Grape Foundation or the Metro Package Association. You want to hear from us? Put yourself on the list. I'll be there.
Yeah, Matt, could we do some kind of speed dating?
I mean, I love that idea. I think of that as, I think one way you could do it would be within each city. Let's say, New York City, Brooklyn, Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. I mean, one way I could see the Wine and Grape Foundation trying to have more of a direct connection would be hosting walk around tastings in these different locales. So, as the buyer, you can maximize your time doing the speed dating, right? You can walk around, meet the producers. This is what, as we know, this is what the really successful importers and distributors do, and it works, especially when you have the people on the ground. And you can double dip. You can do an industry portion in the afternoon, and then you can do a consumer portion in the evening, and you can have order sheets, available at the tasting for consumers with a list of partnering retailers, so people aren't pigeonholed into one retailer. They have their choice, and then they can take those sheets to their stores and say, hey, like, I'd like to special order this, or if you want to stock it, that'd be great. I mean, just this week, something like that happened here locally, in Rochester, and it's a slow burn. You're not going to sell a bunch of wine all at once, but it's like just that steady drip, and that in-person connection happens. I think you maximize time. It is tough because I think we all are limited in time, and so I think having just the list would be difficult because you're going to put a lot of people in awkward positions who, maybe have to, like, look, nobody wants to turn anyone away, but it may result in some hard feelings just because, hey, like, my schedule's crazy this week, I can't meet up. And I really like the other tactic I would advise is, Yancey, I would say talk to, when you're in stores that you do well in and you see other fine wine sales reps, ask them where the fish are biting. Like, that is the best way to do it, is on the ground. Ask them, hey, who cares about good wine? Who cares about cool climate wine? Do you know of anyone doing something innovative or programming wise that you think I could fit into? Like, that is your best resource because they know. I wouldn't necessarily talk to, like, the big wholesalers because they have to cover everywhere. But, talk to your Skurnik reps you see there, talk to the T. Edward reps, talk to planner reps, like, get to know those people, and they will start to show you the way, because there's nothing worse than going out with a bag of wine and wasting your time, either at accounts that don't want to see you or don't have the budget to support your wines. You just want to skip those accounts. So that would be my advice, is get the inside scoop and follow up on those leads that are given to you.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something we could do. I came back from Wine Paris 2 weeks ago. And when you register, you click a lot of boxes to say I'm interested in XYZ. I wonder if there was, something that maybe could live within, the New York Wine and Grape Foundation to say, for retailers to raise their hand and be like, I do want to learn more about New York State wine, and I would welcome conversations, or not necessarily a cold call, right? But I would welcome outreach, right? I would welcome, and it's not something completely obtuse because you've put yourself out there for this thing. I wonder if there's something like that. I mean, I will say, what's hard is, as putting my buyer hat on, there is a New York State. I'll give an example. There's a producer here. It's available now in the UK, and I have told the sales rep that I want to open an account and I want to buy the wine, and I'm still waiting to hear from him. I refuse chase him to give him my money. That is not my job. That's his job. And so, of course, I'm going to end up reaching out to the damn guy again because I want the wine. But, it is, it's a funny dynamic, in terms of, as a buyer, it's bandwidth again. It's who gets in your face the best and in the right way, and you have the relationship
time.
you want to buy at the right time. And so maybe this kind of database could at least say, this is the right time to have a conversation about New York State wine, if nothing else. Mike, you got your hand up?
Yes, so just a couple of reactions and answers for Yancey particularly. So, and those great questions. So, I want to just tell you, I sometimes speak in stories. I think people think it's a little corny, but I think it react answer questions. So I was talking to a rep the other day about a wine. So I went to on my way back to Albany, I stopped in a liquor store that I know, very successful store in Westchester, and I noticed a couple of New York State wines. And I haven't seen them in years. The packaging looked great. I spoke to my rep, and I said a mid-sized wholesale in New York. And I'm not going to mention names of reps and wineries and wholesales, but I think you'll appreciate the story. And I said to them, him, who's in his 60s, he's a been worked at great restaurants, been a worked at a great liquor store, and been a rep for many years in the wine business. Very smart, knows a lot about wine, world traveled, all that. So I said to him, "What do you think of this wine?" So he goes, and then he said to me, "I tasted." Oh, I take that back. I tasted it at the Cab Franc tasting, and I like the new winemaker, and I think it's really worth checking out. I think you'd like it. So people change, things change, but it's me seeking out, and I'm bringing this question to him, and this happens a lot. I ask people all day long, what gin sell? So we have become our biggest problem in I think, our society today is we have this damn phone. We talk very poorly. People text you. They don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to see each other face to face. That's a bit, and we're a busy world, and New York people are crazy busy. We're all busy, right? It's our lives. But I think finding the people that are receptive, Yancey, as you probably know, to these products is the most important thing. So look, many stores have websites, and I'm going to be honest with you, probably of the 3,500 liquor stores, 700 of them are the ones that do a lot of the business. And who knows what the percentage is that is interested in quality wine. But you want to be in the places that want to sell different things, want to sell quality wine. And if you want to be in the 100 right accounts versus the wrong 300 accounts, because you're only going to get one order from the 300, but the 100 are going to be probably reorder from you all the time. So we all know that, right? That's what we want. And as a retailer, I want to have products on my shelf that people want and like and are receptive and come back for more. So it's hard to put that down in a presentation, but I think we all agree on that. But then I look at things, so, and I don't want to attack small wholesalers or people. Like I was looking at a couple of New York State wine brands, and I went and I looked on Provi, which is a kind of the bev media of nowadays technology. And some of these wineries aren't even listed on Provi. So by law, you have to file your brands at the state of New York. If I really, really wanted to, I could go on the New York State Liquor Authority website and find out the name of the company or the winery and get at least, and then I have to Google them, email them. But if I want to and then it shows me pricing on it in New York. But if I want to buy a case of wine, and this happens, if a customer goes into a restaurant, likes your wine, comes back and says to me, I want to buy, and I don't need to speak to anybody. I just want to buy a case or I want to learn more about, I need to have some sort of central platform. So having a wholesaler and having certainly Southern Empire have their own websites. The smaller ones utilize usually Provi. They haven't invested into, but you have to have a web portal and an information page, and ability for people to see wholesale pricing, which Provi does help with. You put in your liquor license. So these are different. Just a little example of how to make our lives easier to connect. Um, I think from this foundation, having some sort of central information board, whether it's a listing of all the wineries, contact people, if you want to have if you want to, I want to be able to, if I want to connect and I read about your wine or taste it, if I want to be able to connect with you, have that ability. I think this foundation probably, with some investment, if they're not doing it, don't have the ability already, could probably figure out almost like be a Ma Bell, old school, of connecting, hey, I'm going to put you two together. And I think that's really helpful. But as far as the I think for getting into accounts, like you said, Upper West Side, all the different areas, I think there's always going to be a store, and not all of them, that is receptive to wanting to try something new and get new customers in their store, or old customers, to see what exciting that they're doing. And I am constantly firing brands, and I call them firing and hiring them. I hire new brands every day, and I fire new brands. Things people are there. The days of people drinking Dewar's every day are over. The people that drank rum and Coke, Bacardi and Coke, every day of their lives, it doesn't exist anymore. Consumers are promiscuous. You
I
see
got some
people
uncles
day.
that'll disagree with you there, but
You say, but you see when you go out to dinner, people are having a cocktail in the beginning of the evening. They're having something, a wine with their meal. It's all, they're drinking so many different things. So I actually think that creates opportunity for all of us, because if you're that store that says, "Hey, listen, I got to put this in your hand. I just tasted this last week. I love it. I think you're going to love it. I know what you like." That this is the opportunity. So um, the big bulk brands, which there's nothing against them, and I think they play a really strong part. And seeing like that, the gentleman who did Blue Nun, I have a real problem with our industry that we don't have entry level brands that get people interested in our wines, that one day then will. We don't have that anymore. I think that is a lost art in our. We don't have the Lancers, the Reading. We don't seem to promote that. We go from 0 to 100 miles an hour with the customer and expect a 25-year-old kid to be able to spend $50 on a bottle of wine and understand it. That's, to me, we could have hours conversation with me about this. But I think you all represent quality, and I think it's in the stores and restaurants specifically that know how to hand sell and talk about things. And I think that's a group of people that, like Matt was saying, everybody talks, everybody communicates and chops it up all the time. So I personally think that would be the way to go. And I'm all for having these conversations myself. And I think there's a lot of retailers that would like to do that, the ones that want to be successful.
So Chad, I want to talk to you. I think there's kind of two kind of parts here. I think one, there is, how is Lakewood putting themselves out there, right? How accessible are you? I think, to Michael's point, a website is an invaluable tool. And if you have a shit website, I mean, it's just you're it's not going to work. I mean, the investment that we made into the Good Wine, Good People site 2 years ago has paid dividends. I am personally an e-commerce guy that likes to shop on my laptop. But as we've learned, over 75% of my website users are using their phone. And thank God I hired a developer that's smart enough to anticipate that and built a mobile friendly site for us. On a wholesale side, there is even this platform that was introduced to me yesterday. You can put a bottle books kind of a thing together on your site, but there's always a gatekeeper, right? You need to put a password in. I need your email address, that kind of thing. Even now, you go to my trade page and I'll give you RRPs, but not prices. You want prices, you have to talk to me. What are you guys doing to make yourselves accessible? How do you guys do it? How are you feeling about it? And then what else are you guys playing with that could get everybody jazzed up?
Well, I mean, I feel like our website's pretty slamming. We've invested a lot of time and energy and money into it, both for consumer and trade media. We actually have a trade and media section on the website that has our tech sheets, and you can download, the, I guess, now antiquated shelf talkers, but I still think that they're useful in certain areas. But you can get all that right off our website. We talk about the awards, we talk about the history of the winery. And I actually use it when I'm going from shop to shop. Maybe 80% of the time, I'll actually pull up our website and show the buyer that I'm talking to, this is our website. This is how you get to our trade and media section. I almost bore them with it because I'm very proud of our website. And I think that we've put a vast amount of information on there, that if you spend a little bit of time and you dug into it, you're gonna be pretty impressed. One of the parts of our website that I also like for the consumer is, if you are from Albany and you tried some liquid wines and you really like it, there's a section on our website that, find liquid wines in your area. You type it in and it pops right up, both on and off premise. So we have, restaurants that are carrying our wines on there as well. And that seems to, sometimes at least excite the buyer that I'm working with. One thing I kind of wanted to touch base, you had mentioned, you found a product you really like, you got a hold of the wholesaler, nothing, right? And I think that's one of my big challenges personally as the brand ambassador for the winery is I'll go in and I'll pitch our product. I have a great conversation. We spend a lot of time together. I leave and 2 weeks later, nothing's happened. And I think that's kind of the responsibility of the producer sometimes to get a hold of the wholesaler and have that conversation with the wholesaler so they know that you're going into a particular place if you're not riding with them, and then follow up with them. A lot of, we all know, regardless of the size of the wholesaler that you're working with, they're very busy. So you're easily forgotten, quite frankly. So you gotta be the squeaky wheel all the time to make sure that your product's getting where it needs to go. And I would think that's true of the retailer as well, right? If you found something you like, then it kind of falls on both of us to make sure that product lands on your shelf.
It's very much as Katie said in the second session, getting a distributor is not a opportunity to put your feet up. It's
Right.
it's it's an
Starting all over
opportunity for you
again, new
to
relationship.
work. Yeah, it's another workflow for you, for sure.
Just to touch quickly as well, I think one of the things that works well for our particular winery, we have a very robust tasting room with knowledgeable staff, and we get a lot of people through the winery from year to year, like the majority of the Finger Lakes, and I would say New York State producers as a whole. And I think to remind folks that you can get the product that you're tasting in our tasting room at home, right, is really important. Try and engage them at the winery that, we do sell wholesale and our wines are available in restaurants around the area. Helps promote our product. But then it really falls on us, the producer in market, to remind the off-premise and on-premise guys that we see people at the winery from your area. I know that there's excitement about our product in your area. So it goes both ways. So I think that websites, though, we all know you get on a crappy website and it's a waste of your time. So investing the time and energy and money on your website's huge for sure. We all know that, but
Yep. Just a little bit, one more touch on the kind of technology side of things in terms of ways to tell stories. And it's things that I did touch on in previous sessions, so I will be brief. But we worked with a podcaster named Lawrence Francis, who does the Interpreting Wine podcast, who's done a lot of work with the New York Wine and Grape Foundation as well. I was episode 13, OG. But since then, just very recently, we put together a series of sound bites. We call them seller sound bites with one of my producers who's based in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I thought I picked this producer specifically to kind of trial this project with, because people are going to be curious about winemaking in Nova Scotia, Canada, similar to how I think they will be curious about winemaking in New York State. I think the grape varieties that they're working with, there's a lot of hybrid going on. There's biodynamic viticulture. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to dig into. And so we created an audio series, right? And it's basically me explaining as a buyer, as a retailer, why I'm excited about these products, and then hearing from the producer, direct from the source, about their story and about these wines. And these things live indefinitely. They live in perpetuity on my website on a page dedicated to them. Whenever we do a trade tasting, the QR code is there for you to scan. You can listen to it while you're in your car. It's on Spotify, and it's an opportunity to introduce yourself in a really intimate way that only takes one go. You know, we had to record it once and we published it, and now it's there and it'll be there, right? It could always use refreshing and updating as things change, but it's a great way to touch base. Our video series that I talked about, the Meet the Maker series, 90 seconds with a selfie video, gives you, a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? A 90-second video tells you a lot about a person and a lot about their wine. You watch the video that Steve Mathiasen did for me, and you tell me that you don't understand what this guy's about in his wine, right? In 90 seconds, right? Just walking through the vineyard into the winery and chatting. And this man is not a public speaker. He will be the first to tell you that he hates it. And so if he could do it, I trust that everybody can do it. And now that we've probably got 20 videos on the site, you could see a lot of different approaches to it, right? Where you can make it your own. And these things live there as a way to touch base where you can't travel across the world or across the state, right? But you can have an introduction for people. Those QR codes can be scanned from anywhere. Again, people are using their phones instead of a shelf talker. Just put a QR code there and see what happens. It could be a lot there. Michael, I want your comment, but then I want to go to Sam as we start to kind of wrap up, because we've got some kind of questions on how to move forward.
Sure. Just quickly. So, Chad, just to point out, finishing that story about the rep.
Sorry, Michael, I'm so sorry. I clicked the wrong button. I was trying to get rid of your hand and I ended up muting you. It was not on purpose, I promise.
No worries. So just Chad, just in the point you were making about staying on the reps and all that. So what I was trying to point out about that rep that happened to taste those wines, retaste those wines, that Cab Franc taste. And what I think is these reps have huge books, and I'm saying this to help at the wholesale level and I think they need to revisit these things and talk about them, and they have a huge book, and uh, I mean, maybe some sort of collaboration where one day we take a ride up with a bunch of reps from the wholesaler or some up in the area. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here, but it's the odd thing is it is close enough to like come visit Mid Hudson for liquor and wine retailers from New York State, New York City, or other areas. Come do a day trip, do an overnight trip, do something with a collaboration with the wholesalers. Another thing I would love to know is it legal? I don't know if it is. I probably doubt it is to send us a sample. If I, get in touch with you guys, Chad or Yancey, and say like, I love to try this wine. Can you FedEx me a bottle? It's probably. I mean, maybe you have to write on the label specimen, something like that. Just put a big stamp on it saying for sample only. If that could be legal, that may actually help some of this conversation. And then we could do a Zoom conversation if there's only one person and taste the wine. I mean, just thinking. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. So just to try to help this, because if you're one person and you're covering the state of New York and there's 50,000 accounts, it's really hard for you all to get around. I know driving around Brooklyn is difficult. So,
Chad or Yancey, do you want to just jump in on the logistics of that idea?
I'm certainly no more knowledgeable about the legality. It certainly sounds like, why not? But that often doesn't click with our laws. Common sense doesn't
stamp the
necessarily
label,
answer.
specimen only, tasting. I've seen that over the years. I don't know, but maybe worth checking out. We all can reach out to this just to be helpful. So just throw
I
it.
mean, I believe you can send samples as long as it's clearly dictated as a sample. Like your barcode is scribed out. There's sample label, stickered on the bottle itself. That kind of thing. You can certainly do that as long as it's intended for, promotion of the product with someone like yourself, Michael. Right? I'm pretty positive. Sam might be able to. I don't know. I mean, Sam was a one-stop shop at one time. He might be able to answer that better than I could. I'm pretty positive you can do that as long as it's clearly dictated that it is not intended for sale. So,
yeah. Well, Sam, good transition there. If you want to comment on again that bit, but then we want to talk just we've had these three conversations now, and they've been wonderful. How do we take it to the next level? What can we look to in this relationship that the New York Wine and Grape Foundation is fostering between retailers and producers? What's next?
This has definitely been a long time coming, and I wasn't able to participate in the meeting that Michael attended last week in Albany, but as I mentioned on a previous call, I have had constant communication with Todd Vandervoort, who is the lobbyist for the New York State Liquor Store Association, and his firm also helps to manage the Metro Store Package Association. And I think it all comes down to relationships. And I'll stand by what I said before, which is the only legal place to buy wines off premise are wine and liquor stores in New York State. And so it's in our interest to work with them and figure out a way how we can get them exposed to more New York wines and get their customers excited about New York wines. So, I think the tension for us is that the general wine industry in the US is in a bit of a downturn. So there is this pressure on everyone to make their sales goals and stay in business. And so, they look to us to help facilitate those opportunities. And Yancey has said this to me many times. She's like, when are you going to bring back New York Drinks New York? And,
Broken record.
big tasting events are great. They really raise the profile. What we found is getting the data from the wineries to say, well, okay, well, what was the pull through in terms of sales from that? They didn't really report that well. So the funder that was supporting that event decided they weren't going to pay for a party in New York City anymore, even though, that's how wine is sold. You got to do these tasting events, but a tasting event is not the end all be all. Like that is like, you're knocking on the door, but the wineries have to keep showing up after that. We need to do more comprehensive marketing, and that all costs money. And so, like I said, our budget is 2.5 million. We're competing against France that spends $2 million. They probably do 4 large tastings events per year, as whatever the Wines of France Association is, or even their sub associations, maybe more. But they have the boots on the ground with the distributors doing the work with the wineries, as Michael was saying. So there needs to be a more comprehensive strategy that is tackling at this from multiple angles. So sorry to go back to the New York Drinks New York Grand Tasting that costs $180,000 to produce for one day. And our budget is 2.5 million. So you're talking about a pretty significant part of our budget to execute one event that it feels really good, but there's more that needs to be done to support the pull through. To loop back to what I was saying about our relationship with the retailers. So Todd Vandervoort, the lobbyist, he's working on seeing if we can get some more funding out of the state budget to support more of this relational building with the retailers. And I don't know the specific rules about sending sample bottles. I know with the PR consultants we worked with in the past, they mail out bottles to media and trade. We've worked with a group called Master the World, which is a company in California that rebottles the wines and puts them in kind of, I think, 2 to 3 ounce samples. So we've done webinars where, I think it's been varietal focused, and we send the trade that participates these kits with six 2-ounce bottles, and they sample it that way. And I see that's a way that we can grow. I think my most immediate takeaway is, if you're a Wine and Grape Foundation member, we've started to engage more with the Wine Market Council, who's doing really fantastic research about the future of the wine market. And, they've uncovered some really important trends or potential opportunities with new consumers that we should be focused on. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's a demographic change underway in the US and across the world, and consumers are different. I think Matt was talking about, it's like, the 25 to 40-year-olds, they're consuming differently, and we need to adjust our marketing, our tactics to respond to that and meet them where they're at. So, I think it can be done. And the beautiful thing about New York is it's an incredibly diverse state. And there's a lot of different interest groups or, cultures and ethnicities that they all like to pair their food with good wines. I know Matt said don't do food pairings, but there is a place for everyone at the table. It's just being a little bit more bespoke and intentional about how we market.
Awesome. We just had a question pop in. How much demand for small format do we see? So that would be a question for either Mike or Matt, or potentially even Chad or Yancey. Has anyone asked you for smaller format products?
I mean, I get small format is interesting. I think consumers, and there's a whole study being done even in the spirit side of it, that the consumers are drinking smaller bottles for a couple of reasons. Price point, obviously, you could buy a 375 of Knob Creek versus a 750. It's less investment. You may not be drinking as much. You may even be drinking better. I think that's a real possibility. Wineries, wholesalers, and importers are not very good at consistency with half bottles. I personally think it's a great idea. I'd love nothing more when you go out to a good restaurant and you want to order a half bottle of white to start your meal with something you're having, and then you go to a red where you flip flop that, or you try three different wines. It's really actually a lot of fun to do that. My half bottle section is goes in different stages, um, particularly in the store, and I sell it a lot. It's an afterthought, but it's not a priority. Obviously, the 750 is the priority. But if there's something that is offered in a half bottle, I say a lot of times I say, "Wow, I'll grab a case, put it on the shelf," just because there's always somebody shopping in that section. There's also, I think, people like dry January and all that. I noticed it's less of a conversation in dry January, but I think people want to slow it down a bit after the holidays. They drink a little better, they're drinking better, they're drinking less. And I think there's sometimes a conversation about that. So all these things, I think we have to think like this. I think there is an opportunity. And talk about that. Yes, I think half bottles can be a real opportunity. That's a short answer.
Thanks, Mike. So I just checked the time. We're nearly at time. I do want to just run around the group quickly just for final thoughts, your moment of Zen, anything you got for us as we sign off. And I look forward to continuing this dialogue between retailers and our New York State producers. It's been a really fun couple of hours to spend with you all. Thank you so much for your insights and your time. And so, Yancey, I'll turn it to you, and then we'll just run through the group real quick.
I just think it's been particularly valuable personally because it's really thought-provoking. There have been some good ideas, and just, it's helped me to really focus on what my challenges and opportunities are.
Thank you so much. How about you, Matt?
I love conversations like this. Like Michael said, chopping it up is my favorite activity, and I think meeting the personalities, the people at the wineries, other retailers, it gives you confidence, gives you faith, gives you inspiration. So I have nothing but hope, and I'm honestly really confident in the future. So I can't wait to see where future discussions go and what the state of New York wine holds for us.
I love it. Chad?
I, you know, I this year it feels like at the beginning of the year there's been a lot of doom and gloom about, how alcohol sales are down and, we're all struggling. But in reality, things feel good, right? I mean, like for us, people are receptive to our product. I'm not getting in 100% of the shops that I walk into, but I'm getting into 30%, 40%, and I call that a win for me. I think
There was no percent.
one of the takeaways from this is that we're such a diverse group of retailers and producers that I hope we do this again, and I hope that the foundation, not that I don't love all of you, but that they choose a different group of panelists, because I think that like a different size retailer, a different size winery with a different perspective. We're going to get different answers for the same questions, and I think that would be very helpful for everybody that's tuning in on this. I would commend the foundation for doing this in the first place. I think it's a long time coming, and we're
Yeah.
thankful to be part of it. So
Awesome. Michael?
Thank you for the opportunity to spend time with all of you. This has definitely been eye-opening. There's exciting time. I mean, like I said, it's brought this before. It's brought this to the front. These wines and these wineries and you individuals, because I think we're all in business and we're human beings, and I think that's a huge part of this. And what I've spent a lot of time with folks like all of you, just talking business and talking shop. You learn a lot of things. It's inspiring, and I think this is exceptionally valuable. And happy to be part of it. Happy to be a part of the future of it as well. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, mate. And Sam, over to you.
I'll just make a plug again for the Wine Market Council research. We did a webinar with them last Friday. If you missed that, I really encourage you to watch it because there are some encouraging trends that they have observed, and it's an opportunity to adjust your marketing strategy to, you know, hit those emerging consumers that are interested in wine. They just approach it differently. And I'll make a shameless plug for our export program, because if you've enjoyed spending these 3 sessions with Dan, if you join the export program, you potentially can make a trip to the UK or France and hang out with him and sell more wine. You know, I know this has been very domestically focused, but I would say export is a good opportunity to diversify your business, because internationally there's a lot of reception to New York wines. We're opening up Korea and Vietnam this year. And, you know, Chad can tell you that we went to Vietnam on our Lead New York Cornell trip, and there is a vibrant restaurant community in Saigon that would love some, you know, fresh white wines from New York to go with their delicious food. And we're also looking to open the Caribbean as well. We're going to be hiring a market rep for that. And this is all due to USDA, as we've gotten a couple new grants from them, but also we just got notice last week that we got another $650,000 grant to continue our work in the UK, Japan, and Canada. Hopefully, Canada will come back into the fold. But anyway, just want to consider the export program. It's a good opportunity to explore new markets and hang out with Dan.
And I'm always happy to have a chat with anybody that wants to kind of discuss it a bit further. As a small business owner, as a massive fan of New York State wine, this group chat has been a real treat for me too. And I just want to say thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.